Welcome back everybody to another video in our series of how to do some basic 2D gaming in Unity. In this video we're going to look at how to set up a start and or game over, restart, little pop-up menu for our game. So we already have a canvas in our scene. Canvas right now just has one little health box for our health text, and what I want to do is make a pop-up menu that will just pop up at the beginning or pop up at the end when the game is over, giving the player the opportunity to quit the game or start the game over again or whatever you want to put there. So we're going to use what's called a panel in our canvas. So let's click on our canvas and then we can right click it. We go to UI and let's get this one here called panel. What a panel is it's a kind of an overlay. It's like a little pop-up. By default it's set to stretch across the screen, the whole entire width and height of the screen, and its color is set to be semi-transparent. So it's got the alpha drag down a little bit so we can still see through to things that are below it. So let's make a few changes here. I don't want this to cover my whole entire screen in this case. I mean, I could leave it like this if you wanted it to be this way, but if you don't want it to be this way, what you can do is you can go into the anchor presets and just select the center anchor point. When we take it out of stretch and give it a different anchor point like center, that gives us the ability to specify a width and a height. So maybe I want the width to be 500 and the height to be 500, and we just put a box out in the middle of our screen like so. We could do that. If you want to make it wider or bigger, we could do that as well. Maybe we'll do 750. Maybe that looks a little better. Give us enough space to do some things. So this is our panel, and it's always a good idea to give these names. So we'll call this our menu panel. And now we can use this panel like a container. Okay, we can put elements in here, text, buttons, whatever we want, and we can make those children of this menu panel, and then we have the ability to turn the whole entire panel and all its children off or on as needed. So maybe we want to make this have a few elements in it, so let's right click the panel and go to UI. Let's make a text. We'll have some sort of a text here for displaying a message to our player of our game, so maybe that'll be up here somewhere and we can just drag that out larger, give it a bunch of space on the screen. Now if you drag this out by hand, you can do that. If you want to make sure things are centered, if you go up here into your rect transform, you just make position X to be 0. That'll actually center this right along the middle. And again, we have anchor points here, so I'm just going to go ahead and anchor all this stuff to the center of my panel, and that should be fine. And maybe I'll just move this up a bit. So here's going to be some text, and then let's put a few buttons in here so we can have some options for the player to click. So we'll call this here our message text, and then let's add a button. So again, I'm going to go to the menu panel, I'm going to right click it, UI. This time I want a button, so I'll click button. That'll drop a nice little default button in here, and let's drag this one maybe over here somewhere, and we can make these buttons a little bit larger. So right now they're 160 by 30, so maybe we make it well, let's just drag a little wider here and see what it looks like. Let's just make these bigger and bolder. So maybe 225 by 60. We'll see what that looks like. And let's make another button. So once you get a button set up, you can duplicate it. So let's kind of zoom in here and set this button up, get the font and the color and everything the way we want it. So buttons have two pieces to them. You've got the parent button object, which has the rectangle transform. It's got the ability to change what the button itself looks like. You can specify custom sprites for these buttons if you don't want just the regular square one. This is the color for the background of your button, so maybe this button will be for, make it maybe kind of a greenish color. Maybe this will be our play again button, so that we want that to be kind of green for go. So we can do that. There's all these different tinting for hoverovers, so that you can change the appearance of the button as you hover and it reacts, and all that. They also have inside of the button, they have a child that's the text, and that's the actual text box that's on top of this button that has the text on it. So instead of saying button here, let's call this play again, or let's just call it play. That way we can use it at the beginning and the end. That's pretty small text for the size of button we have here. So let's go here to our font size. Let's try like maybe a 25. See how that looks. We could make it bold it up a little bit there. And again, the text color is right here. So you know, we want to pick a color that shows up well. We could just go with black, which might be fine in this case, but you can pick whatever text color that you want. So there we have a play button. And then now that we have this one set up kind of the way we want it, let's go ahead and duplicate it. So you can click on the button here, and you can right click and say duplicate. You'll get a new button. It's sitting in the exact same spot as our current button, so we can drag that one over, and maybe we lock this one over to this side. And let's give these some names here. So this is going to be my play button, and this one down here is going to be my quit button, like that. And then all we have to do on the quit button is go in and change its color if we want to. So maybe quit's going to be kind of a red, and the text color can be the same, but let's change what the text says. So we'll go into the text here, and instead of play, we'll have this say quit. And then we can see we have play and quit buttons along with our text box up here above that we can put in some text. Okay, so let's actually go in and format this message text a bit. That's pretty small, so let's make maybe 50-point font here. We should have space to do a couple lines of code, and maybe we want to center align this, so we'll do that. Alright, so now we've got the different elements in my panel set up. I've got a place for message text, and I've got a play button and a quit button here all set up as part of this panel. So I can fold that panel like that so that it's just all inside. See how these elements are children of the panel. And what's good about this is if I move this panel, all this will move with it and stay positioned inside of it. Also, if I disable this panel, so if I go to its game object and disable it by unchecking it, the panel will disappear. Okay, it's still here in the hierarchy, but right now it's just invisible and it's not going to be in the way of anything. And then when I need it, all I have to do is enable it. So I can disable and enable this panel to make it pop up or disappear. Okay. Now the other thing we might want to look at in the panel itself is this background here has a color. It's right here. So instead of white, I can make this tinted whatever color I want. So maybe I'll make this panel kind of some sort of a bluish color in here. And then right here where we have the A, this is your alpha. This is how transparent this panel is. If I go all the way to the right, this panel becomes 100% opaque. I can't see through it at all. As I drag this way, though, you can see that it starts to become more and more translucent. All the way down to 0 means that you can't see it at all. So you could make a panel that's just see-through and just have elements right on top of your scene. A lot of times, though, it's nice just to kind of tint that in a bit to kind of set it off from the rest of what's going on behind you. You can still see the state of your game here at the beginning or the end of it, like this. Alright, so that's a little bit about how to set those up. So the other part then would be going into our script and actually turning this panel on and off depending on when we want it to show up and we want it to be hidden. So I'm just going to go into the player movement script here, make that a little bigger for you. This is where we added that text for our health text the other day. So what we need to do is establish a connection to this panel here. And then we'll probably also want a connection to this message text so we can put in what we want this message to be. That way it can be a multi-purpose type of thing. So let's make a couple of variables, one to hold the panel and one to hold the text. So back in our script here, let's make a public and let's just make this a game object variable for our panel. So we'll call this our menu panel. And then let's make a public text variable for that message text, like that. That way we can establish links to both of those, and then we can manipulate them from our code. So I'm going to save that and go back out into Unity, and then if I click on my player, in his movement script here, I've got these two new variables, menu panel and message text. So just like we do with help text, all we have to do is grab these things from the hierarchy and drop them in. So for the panel, I'm going to go ahead and grab the menu panel here and drop it right in to here. Alright, so now we have the game object of this. I'm getting the game object of the panel so I can actually turn its game object on and off, make it appear and disappear. The text for the message text, I just grab that right there and drop that in there. So now I've established a link. My code, my script will know what I'm talking about when I say menu panel and message text now, and it will be able to affect the appropriate thing out here in my hierarchy. Back to the script now. So we've set up the connection. At the beginning of the game, let's say that we want this panel to be visible, and we're going to let that panel control whether the game has started, or maybe we just want this to pop up at the end of our game. We're going to do something different. Really, it's pretty flexible. If you want this to happen before you start, then you're going to have a way of making sure that your game is not doing anything at the beginning, whether you stop the game clock or whether you put some sort of a variable in here that just tells everything not to do its things. We could stop the game clock here, for instance. So you know, at start, we're going to wait for player to click the start button before starting the game. So we could do something like this. We could say time scale. This is the game clock. So we can use this for slow-mo or sped up or even just pausing our game. So we could say time scale equals 0. If I set my time to 0, maybe better make that a 0f for a float, then that means to tell the game clock not to move, just to pause. So I could just freeze time in the game like this, and then I could make sure that my panel is visible. So let's make the menu panel visible, and what we would do is we would go to the menu panel and we'd say dot set active. So menu panel is a game object. One of the properties of a game object is this set active, and if I say true, that activates it, makes it visible and on the screen, and if I say false, it turns it off. So we'll put a true right in here. That'll make sure that that is visible at the beginning of the game. So let's just see what happens if I save this at this point. Let's also, before we do that, let's go in and change the message text. So here we'll say message text dot text. Remember, message text gets me the whole entire text element. Dot text gets me the actual text that's being displayed in the text box. So I can set the text equal to something. It would be equal to a string, and maybe we'll say press start to begin. We'll just give it a message like that. Press start to begin, and then we'll save that. So when I go in here now to Unity and I hit play, this box should stay visible and the text should update, and nothing else should happen in my game. Let's just see what happens. Alright, you'll notice that it says here, let's make it so we can see the actual game view window better. Press start to begin. If I try to move my player around, you notice how he is kind of flipping directions, but he's stuck. So the rotating isn't taking place over time really, so it's just happening all at once with these inputs. You can see that if you look, let's go zoom in so you can see that a little better. Like on my little skeleton guy here, he's just sitting here. But if I push buttons, he is responding to it. I I can't, I could actually shoot an arrow and it'll just sit there. So this isn't perfect, but it is one kind of an easy way just to kind of freeze everything up if you want to. When we unpause this, that arrow is going to go flying and whatnot, but it does keep the spider isn't moving, he isn't patrolling, he isn't doing any of the things we've done in this game. Okay, so it does kind of just keep everything paused. Like I said, it's not a perfect way to do this, but it's an easy way to kind of control when a game starts. Now what we want to do is make it, when we click this play button here, that this panel goes away and our game clock starts, and then we can move around and everything happens in our game the way we want it to. So now we have to look at how to tie a button in. So on my play button, you go out and you click on the button element, and over in the inspector you scroll down and you see this on click event box here. So what I can do is I can tell this button what to do when it gets clicked. To add an event to its on click, we hit the plus button here right now, and this gives me an ability to specify what's going to happen. So usually what we do is we'll point these buttons at one of our objects that has a script attached to it, and in that object script we've got a function that we want to run when we click the button. So in this case we're going to point the button at our player, and in our player's movement script we're going to have a function that's going to handle what happens when we click play. So let's go set that up in the script here first. So I'm back in the player movement script. Let's go down to the bottom here and set up a new function. I'm going to make this a public function so I can see it, so that the button can see it. And this isn't going to return anything, so it's a void. We'll call this start button, and this is the function we're going to call. So we want the start button to first of all turn off that panel, our menu panel. So we'll say menu panel. We'll use the set active command again, and this time we'll say false. And what that will do is that will turn that panel off. It will be invisible. It won't be active. Any scripts attached to it will also be turned off. It'll just get everything out of the way. And then we'll start our game clock. So we just say time.timescale equals 1. 1 is normal speed in your game. Okay, if you go below a 1, it'll be slow-mo. If you go above a 1, it'll be, making the clock run faster, and things will speed up in your game. So that's can be kind of fun to play with if you want to do any slow motion kind of effects in your game. So this now, when we click the start button, we're going to have it turn the panel off and start our time. So let's save that. We'll go out into Unity here. We will go to our play button. And now in this onClick event we're ready to set it up. So we need the object that has the script, that has the function in it that we want to run. The object is my player, which is the skeleton. So I'm just going to drag the skeleton in from the hierarchy. Now over here we have a drop down, and we need to tell this what script it is that from our skeleton that has the function we want to run. So that's in my top down player movement script. This shows me all my public functions. I've got one here called start button. That's the one I want to have run, so I'm going to click that. So now I've told this button, when you get clicked, go to the top down player movement script on my skeleton and run the start button function. So let's give this a try and see if this works. So here we are. If I hit play, the panel went away, and I can now move, and I can shoot, and I can pick things up, and I can do all the things in my game. The game clock is running, the enemies are active, everything is good to go. So that is how we can launch the game with the panel. Alright, so let's say that when the game is over, in this case let's say we run out of lives and we're dead like I am right now, that we want to do the same thing. Just stop the game clock and load that panel up and give the player the ability to play again or to quit. So that means we're going to be setting up our quit button here so that it knows what to do when it becomes active. So let's go back into our script. So right now when we take damage on our player, and we're just doing a debug.log if we're dead. So what we're also going to want to do now when we die is we're going to want to stop the game clock, and we're going to want to pop that panel up. So we could just add right in here if health is less than or equal to 0. Actually, let's make sure our health gets reset to 0 first, just in case, so we don't get anything weird in our panel. But let's go ahead and turn our menu panel back on in this case. So we'll say menu panel dot set active, and we'll say true. Same thing we did up at the beginning. So now when we die, we're going to set that equal to true. And let's go ahead and stop our time clock. We'll do time scale equal to that 0. So that will freeze time. The menu will now be active. And then perhaps we want to change the text on that menu panel. So let's go ahead and do, actually it was message text. Let's just set that equal to game over, like that. Okay, so now we'll have it say a different message there. Our time scale is set, and then we will be ready to make that quit button work. And then we'll also have to look at the start button again, because we might need to do some different kinds of things here for start. Otherwise the game might just pop up game over again. We'll take a look at that in a minute. Anyway, we'll turn the panel on, we'll give it a message, we'll freeze time when we die. Okay, so let's go back out into Unity here, and let's just see what happens now. And oh, see, I made this error here. Remember when I said you can't just set message text equal to something? It's message text dot text. Forgot to put the dot text in there. Pretty common error for people to do. All right, let's fix that and go back out. We'll get that fixed right away. Okay, so we're gonna hit play. We're gonna play our game. We're gonna go ahead and let the spider shoot me here until I run out of life. So you can see my health is dropping down up there, and I'm dead. So you notice everything freezes. Now I can still kind of move around a bit, and like I said, there's ways to fix that. But I have my play button and my quit button. Now if I hit play again, it's going to start again, but as soon as I get hit again, it's going to stop. That's because I'm not resetting any of my variables. So we might have to rethink this. If we're going to use this play button here for playing and for starting again, then we probably need a different way to do that. But let's focus on the quit button right now. So when I click quit, I actually want my game just to end. I want it to end the window it's playing in, close that down, and get out of the game. So here's how you can do that. Let's go back into our script here, and just like we had a start button function, let's make a function for the quit button. Alright, and what we're going to do when we quit, we just want the window that this game is playing in our computer just to shut down. So we can just say application.quit, and what that will do is that will cause the player application to quit. Now this does not work in the editor, so this does not work in the editor, only in the stand-alone published version of our game. Okay, so we'd actually have to build this game and run it from the executable, then this will work. It won't do anything in the editor, so a lot of times what we'll do is we'll drop a little debug.log in here just to make sure that it's actually going here, and we can say something like game, we'll say quit button has been pressed, just so we can make sure that it actually went here in the code, everything is hooking up correctly. Then in our build, we'll know that this application.quit function will run. Alright, so let's save that. We'll go out into Unity here now. Okay, now back out in Unity, we just have to tie our button into that function that we just made. So we're going to click on the quit button. We're going to go to its on-click event box. We're going to add an event. The script is attached to my skeleton that has that function in it we just made. So I'm going to drag the skeleton back in, just like we did for the other button. I'm going to drop this no function button down, find the script that I put the function in, it's top-down player movement, and then I'm going to look for my quit button function. So now when I click the quit button, it's going to run that function. Let's go in here and test it. So when I hit play, I can start the game. I come up here and the spider now is going to shoot me with his little web until I die, at which point I can click quit and it'll say down here, quit button has been pressed. Again, it's not going to cause my editor to close down and exit. It's not going to take me out of play mode. But in the built-out version of our game that you would distribute to people, it would actually close the window and shut the game down and exit it for the player. So that's all we have to do to tie that in. Now, if you're curious, we can try to fix this little play button here. There's a couple of things that we could do. We could, when we click the play button, just have it reload the whole level. That would be a good thing for restarting. But for actually playing the first time, we don't want to do that, right? Because we just end up right back where we were. So we might want to have two different buttons, one for play, one for play again. We might want to have two different panels, one for start game, one for game over. There's a couple of ways you can do that. But for just a true play button, we would just want to reload the level generally, which would reset everything. Okay, so for now, let's just take a look at how we could do that. We're going to need to do some scene management here. So we need to include and use some other built-in functions here from Unity. So we're going to need to say Unity engine dot scene management. This gives us access to some different commands that will allow us to load levels and exit levels and things like that. So make sure that's the first step for if you want this to be like a play again thing. Then what we would probably want to do here is in our start button, we're going to probably have to make it so this panel only works for restarting right now. If you want to do it for both, then you'd have to modify this. But let's go up here currently and let's just change a few things. Instead, this time, let's just make the game start right away. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn the panel false when the game starts. And we don't need this message text, but it doesn't really matter because it won't be there anyway to be seen, so we can just leave that alone. But we're just going to turn it off, and we're not going to freeze our time. So let's just comment this out. Matter of fact, we'll comment this out too. So this would be another way to use this panel just as a restart panel. Okay, so we'd set active false, turn the panel off. We're not going to freeze time. We'll just let the game start right away. When the game is over and we turn the panel back on, we change the text, we turn the time scale to 0. Then what we can do is we can change our start button here. So let's just kind of take this out. This would be if you want to use this as a restart. So let's just put here restart the game. So in this case, we're changing the purpose of our panel here. Hopefully this isn't confusing to you. But what we can do now is we can go to the scene manager dot load scene, and then we have to tell it what scene we want to load. So what we want to load is this same scene that we're currently in. So we can say scene manager dot get active scene. The get active scene is the scene that we are currently playing, and then from that we can say dot name, because load scene, see if I can get the code completion to pop back up. Load scene needs a scene name as a string. So we need the actual name of this scene. We can get that scene by going to the scene manager and getting the active scene that returns the scene itself. And then if we say dot name, that gets me the string name of it. So that's kind of just how we can get at that. Okay, the other thing we have to do, then we're going to save this, is in Unity we have to set this up in our build settings so that scene manager knows that the scene is okay to load. So you go to File, and you go to Build Settings. So anytime you're going to load levels, you're going to do this. Scenes in Build, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell it to add my open scene. This is my top-down scene. That's the one that I'm currently been building in. So I'm telling it this is a scene in my build. And by putting this in here now, the scene manager can actually load this. So I'm going to close that. So now remember, we've changed things now. So when I hit play, the panel's going to disappear and the game's just going to start. When I run out of lives, the panel's going to pop back up, and if I hit the play button, it's actually going to reload the scene. It'll reset everything like I just ran it for the first time, and everything will start up again. So let's hit play. You notice now this time that the game starts immediately. There is no start menu in this case, and if I die here, run out of lives, then the panel will pop back up, time freezes, and if I hit play, it resets. Okay, now I did one thing here. I didn't make sure that time got restarted again. So you notice time is frozen. That's because I froze the game clock when the game was over right here. And I need to make sure that it's set to 1 whenever the game starts. This will last between scenes sometimes. So up in our start function, let's just make sure that we set our time scale to 1, just to make sure that it's going to start up correctly. So that's why that didn't restart. So if I make sure every time I start the game that time scale is indeed set to 1, that will fix that problem. So let's test it one more time to make sure that that little fix took. Alright, we hit play, game starts up immediately. We come up here, we get shot by the spider here until we die. Game freezes up. If I hit play, everything restarts, and now that I made sure to tell it to make sure that the game clock time scale was set, we're good to go. And then we can just keep doing this over and over and over again, or we can hit the quit button and that still works. Okay, so the main focus of this video was not so much starting and restarting the game, but just the UI part here, where we're able to pop up different menus. So this is an easy way, without changing scenes, to just pop up a little menu on the screen, put a few buttons and some text up there, and allow it to start or restart our game. You could use menus like this for inventories, for you know, talking to NPCs, for whatever. So in your game, make sure you're using these tools for any kind of visual elements that you want and information you want to give to your player. Alright, if you have any questions, make sure you put them in the comments below. As always, thanks for watching. Hope you found this useful, and I'll see you in the next video.